Okay, this is the capstone lesson. It's trying to bring together the three major cultures we just spent time studying, the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, in order to compare and contrast them. The goal here is for you to be able to explain how the Maya, Aztec, and Inca all built power in different ways. Right? They all built structures of power to organize large groups of people. How those different systems all contained different vulnerabilities that left them exposed during times of crisis. So, for quick reference, timeline-wise, right, the Maya classical period is right here, kind of just starting after the year 200 Common Era and ending right around the year 900 Common Era. That's when they were kind of knocking around doing their thing in Mesoamerica down in the Yucatan. But then you see several hundred years later, to their north, you see the rise of the Aztec Empire, and then far to the south in South America, you see the rise of the Inca Empire. So just so you can see where these empires are in a timeline or chronological relationship to each other, the Maya period comes much earlier, and the Aztec and the Inca kind of overlap with each other. And in relation to other events, right, the Aztec and the Inca are just a few decades after Mansa Musa's Hajj in Africa and the Middle East. And the Maya are kind of knocking around doing their thing at the same time that the Prophet Muhammad is helping organize the Islamic faith, and the Sunni Shia split, and all that kind of happens in the first half of the Islamic civilization's golden age. In between these two periods, in Europe and the Middle East, you're going to have the Crusades, which we'll get to next unit. First off, I want to address the fact that this capstone lesson doesn't include information or talk about the different independent societies of North America. That's because they don't really fit into this model we're talking about. They are important to know about, don't forget about for the test, but we're not going to focus on them in this lesson. Instead, we're going to be looking at the shared problem that's going forward with the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. So the same problems occurred in all these cultures. They needed to govern large populations without modern technology. They needed to figure out how to manage the limited resources they had and how to get through and be successful with very different but also very difficult environments. The Maya, they had to deal with the jungle. The Aztec had to do with the marshy swamplands their island was built on. And the Inca had to deal with mountainous terrains. So each had to deal with environmental problems, but very different ones that required different solutions. They also needed to find a way to maintain authority without mass participation or rights. That is to say that the most of people in all three of these societies were the lower class farmers at the bottom of the hierarchy, and you had to find a way to get them to buy into this system and participate, even though they didn't really get to have a say in what the laws were, who's in charge, what the punishments would be. They didn't really have any political rights, so to speak. So how do you get them to buy into this belief system, to the authority of the leaders? Also, how do you prevent instability and rebellion or collapse among their cultures? That's a constant theme. All civilizations have to figure out how to keep themselves stable and how to keep those who are disadvantaged from rebelling and overthrowing the system. Different societies will face similar pressures, but they're all going to respond in different ways. And that's what I want to kind of take a look at today, comparing and contrasting. So the Maya responded by using power through the control of knowledge. They were living in a challenging environment, very unpredictable rainfall, right? It's a rainforest. You might think there's a lot of rain. There is, but it's not predictable, and they had other farming challenges because of the rainforest. So survival depended on having accurate timing and long-term planning knowledge. This knowledge was developed by elites using calendar systems, their knowledge of astronomy, writing systems, and that knowledge was controlled by the elites and their descendants, right? The rulers and the priests, they controlled this sacred knowledge, and their authority, their power over everyone is justified because they have the expertise and knowledge to predict these things that are important for the continuation of society, and they imbued them with religious meaning. There's this natural cosmic order that must be balance, and only the people with this elite knowledge, they understand how the gods operate, and therefore you should trust them with control because they'll keep everything going. This created kind of a trade-off. Right? There's stability through knowledge, but their society is fragile if these predictions fail. After all, if you're saying you have this ability to make predictions because you know so much about the gods, but then you make a prediction and it fails, people are going to start questioning you, and that's going to undermine the whole system. So, like all systems, the Maya did have some vulnerabilities built into the structure of it. The power was all concentrated among the elites, meaning that all the power was up there on the top of the hierarchy. And so when a crisis comes, people are going to start to question that because they don't feel like they have any control over their situation. And the city-states are independent, right? They're constantly competing against each other. They're not uniting and cooperating, which means during a crisis, they can't pool their resources together to solve a problem. If resources become scarce, they will now be in competition with each other for those resources instead of collectively trying to solve the problem. There's also this problem that their whole system is built on accurate knowledge and belief. I can accurately predict when there's going to be an eclipse, when there's going to be rain, all these things. That shows that I do know something that you don't know, that I maybe do have connection with the gods. But if those predictions aren't accurate or things change, that's going to undermine the entire system. And finally, environmental stress will weaken trust in leaders because it is that communication with the gods that people believe is bringing the rain, which is bringing the fertility of the crops. And if the environment changes, then your rituals aren't going to work anymore, and that's going to lead to people questioning the whole system. The Aztec responded by using power through extraction, right? They had a large population growth, but they had very limited farmland. So they solved this problem through expansion with military conquest, creating tributary empires where they forced their neighbors to give them tribute, such as food, goods, and labor for construction. And religion was used to give meaning to all the violence and sacrificial practices of the Aztec people. And you see another trade-off here. There's fast growth and a lot of control from the central emperor, but this is going to create growing resentment among the peoples that you are ruling over. So this kind of creates some structural vulnerabilities in their system, some problems that are just kind of baked into the formula. There is an overdependence on constant expansion in order to get more tribute, and the heavy tribute burdens they place on the areas they conquer creates resentment. After all, it's like, I'm only following you because of fear and obligation. I'm afraid you're going to rip my heart out and use me as sacrifice. I'm afraid your army's going to come and kill me. And then you're taking all my stuff or a lot of my stuff. People are going to get angry, and that might lead to rebellion. So that creates incentives for the people who are part of this tributary empire to resist or even kind of run away or find someone who's willing to challenge the Aztec. There's not loyalty out of love. It's loyal or belief that it's fair. It's loyalty out of, I'm afraid of what you'll do to me if I don't follow you. And that's not a recipe for long-term stability. It's only a recipe for short-term obedience. The Inca, on the other hand, create power through organization, so institutional systems that are centralized. They have a very, very large empire. It's the largest one created in the Americas until the Europeans arrived. So they govern this large area that covers mountains and very, very harsh terrain. They also have a very limited use of money or markets. So there's not a lot of exchange. Like in the Aztecs, you'd see giant markets where resources were being bought and sold. The Inca really didn't have those mass markets. Instead, they had a reliance on labor obligations they called the mita system, where essentially each family or clan had to give so many hours of labor to the government every year. In exchange, the government would make sure you had the resources that you needed to survive. And so all this was planned centrally at the capital by the emperor and his court, giving them really close control over everyone. And people kind of got the resources they needed. And in exchange, they had to provide labor to produce the resources that everyone needed. A lot of times historically, this is kind of seen as like proto-communism, essentially. You have a strong central government that plans all resources. People are required to do work for the government, in exchange the government, make sure you have the resources you need to survive and live. And yeah, I think it can kind of be thought of as kind of a communist empire in the past, before communism was ever even thought of as a thing. So the trade-off here is, right, you have efficiency and you have stability. A lot of resources are being produced. You have a long-term stable society. But the trade-off here is there's a dependence on central control, and that can be a problem. So baked into this, the structural vulnerabilities baked into this system is that there's a really heavy reliance on that central leadership, right? One person in charge at the top. Well, what happens if that leader fails to communicate well, or they're just a really bad leader? The system is going to fall apart, right? It's over-reliant on one single person. Those labor obligations, the work you had to do for the state in exchange for the government providing you with resources, does create pressure on communities, right? Now, people don't like to be told what to do, and because they're overly centralized, when a crisis comes, it can make them slow to act quickly to sudden changes because they're just so used to doing things one way, they can't always react the quickest. So in short, we got three different systems of power. The Maya right here in this red area, they built their authority on knowledge and belief. The Aztec power, their authority, came through forced tribute and fear. And Inca down here in South America, their authority was built on labor and organization, so complex systems that way. Each system solved very real problems that they were facing, but also created new risks based on the way they solved these problems. Now, this is not on your note sheet. I'm not going to make you kind of fill in this, but you maybe want to pause and write this out. This chart is really good information as a way to kind of compare and contrast these civilizations, right? What their problems were for each civilization, right? How they solved it, right? The organized labor, how they solved maintaining authority, how they solved controlling territory, and then the structural vulnerability of each of these three civilizations. So just a quick cheat sheet. Maybe you want to pause and copy that down. If not, hopefully you got it. Seriously, though, it's probably a good idea for you to pause and write this down. So the pattern emerges here that systems form in response to pressure. Something is causing pressure among the people. There's a problem in society. They have to create a system to fix. That system they create, whether it's the Maya through knowledge, or the Aztec through power and fear and tribute, or the Inca through labor and organization, they come with their own trade-offs. Something they have to give up that make this system effective in the short term, right? It helps them meet or respond to that short-term pressure, but in the long term, it can make them vulnerable to a crisis. And they may not, realize even that there's this weakness until that crisis hits them. So another takeaway here is that power can collapse quickly when the foundations start to weaken. So whatever you've built your society on, if that's not a strong foundation, it can weaken over time, even if it starts out strong. That can lead to a quick systemic power collapse if everything just kind of falls apart because the foundation wasn't strong enough to hold everything that came above it. So that's the anchor question here, right? At the end here, we're leaving asking ourselves, what systems of power solved the immediate problems for who, and what hidden weaknesses did they create for future generations? This is not a question I'm asking you to answer right now, but this is more that higher level problem I'm asking you to think about and see if you can kind of put this all together. If you can really give a thorough answer to this, then I'm pretty sure you're in that proficient advanced range for this class. And that's where we're going to leave it for these cultures and these societies. They're strong, they're complex, they're unfinished, right? Their stories are still going at this point in history where we're leaving off. We will come back to these cultures later when worlds start to collide and see how those structural vulnerabilities interact with the new crisis of Europeans arriving. So that's where we're going to leave this story. Strong, complex, but unfinished. As always, I want you to rewrite today's goal from the top of the note sheet. What is it you were trying to get out? You were supposed to get out of this? 3 complete thoughts, 3 complete facts about what you learned today, and then 1 question, as always, that I can answer for you. All right, that's how you're going to remember this. That's how you're going to have a better understanding of this. Until we see you in class again, good luck, and we'll see you then.